Hello everybody, this is Mr. Bowman. So today we're going to be looking at the kites and triangle mid-segments. So the kites are the first of our quadrilaterals we're going to look at, and they're a little odd in how they work, but we're going to look at those. And then we're going to look at triangle mid-segments, which is jumping back a little bit to triangles, but it leads into another one of our shapes that we're going to look at next. So what is a kite? A kite is a quadrilateral. So let's make sure we all know what that means. So it's a quadrilateral that, so it's a shape with four sides. So quad, four lateral sides. Okay, that has a very interesting pattern. So you have two congruent sides that are adjacent, and then two congruent sides that are, the other two sides are congruent as well. So like these two would be the same, and these two would be the same as each other. That does not necessarily mean that they're going to be like this one's congruent to that one. And actually it should not be, most likely. So what does this really mean? Okay, it means that I'm going to have two, for sake of argument, technically this could be upside down, but let's go with this shape. Two shorter sides up top and two longer sides that are next to each other on the bottom. So we have two pairs of congruent adjacent, so equal length next to each other sides. We got a pair up on top, and we have a pair on the bottom. In addition to that, one of our important characteristics is this, which is, these are called diagonals because they go from one vertex to its opposite vertex. In a kite, the diagonals are perpendicular. Okay. And that's going to be important a little bit down the road, but right now you just want to make sure you have those characteristics down for kites. And these are kites. Because we're going to start classifying them based on characteristics, and these are the two main ones you want to know about kites. Okay, so we're not going to dig too far into kites right now, but that's how those start. More of today's lesson is actually about a triangle mid-segments. So what is a mid-segment? We all are pretty confident, I'm sure, knowing what a triangle is, but what's a mid-segment? So if I have a triangle of whatever variety, it doesn't actually matter, maybe it'll look like this. Okay, could be an obtuse triangle, a right triangle, it doesn't matter. Any triangle, if I find the midpoint, so halfway up this side, I'm going to estimate that, and halfway up this side would be about here. Halfway up this one would be about here, so equal lengths on either side there, and halfway would be about there. If I make a line segment that connects those midpoints together, that is known as the mid-segment. So it's the segment that connects midpoints. Okay? Okay. So, great. We have a new shape. Why does it matter? Well, the reason it matters is because there's certain properties that are really useful if we know something is a mid-segment. So if I make this a little bit bigger so it's a little bit easier to see, here, here, I would say it's about the midpoint. Okay. There's two very important characteristics of this mid-segment. But before we get to that, I do want to clarify what I mean. So if this is the midpoint, it means these two pieces are equal, the lengths are equal, and these two pieces are as well. So if I go from here to the midpoint, if that length is 13, this bottom half would also be 13. If this one's 10, this would also be 10, something like that. Okay. So the actual characteristics of the midpoint are 1, this will be parallel to this, which I'm going to call the base because it's the one that's not touching it. You don't have to, but that's what we're going to call it. So it is going to be parallel to the base, okay, which is going to be helpful when we talk about angles, because we can say things like, well, this angle and this angle, if there's a parallel, this thing's a transversal, so these are corresponding and have to be equal. This one and this one would be corresponding and have to be equal. So we can do some interesting stuff with those parallels. But also, the length of the base is twice the length of the midsegment. Okay, so scroll down here. So the length of the base is twice the length of the midsegment. What do I mean? I mean, if I call this A, actually let's call this one A so we don't deal with fractions, then this one has to be twice as long. So it's going to take up twice as much room. So if this is 20, this one would be 10. If this is 100, this would be 50, and vice versa. If this is 30, this would be 60. So you can just double it to get the longer one, or divide it in half to get the shorter one, which is incredibly useful. Okay, so let's take an example of this midsegment and see how it goes. So make sure you have these jotted down because you're going to need them. Keep those words on there. If I have a triangle, let's make this one an obtuse one just to make sure we don't get too set in our ways. Okay. And so if I find a midsegment, that's right. Okay. If I know a few things, so let's call this A, B, C, D, and E. Okay. If I have a couple pieces of information, I can actually fill in most of this thing, most of these pieces. So let's say I know the length of my midsegment is 5. From D to B here is 7. And this entire length from A to C is 20. Okay. I'm going to use a different color so we can keep track of what we're filling in. If that's what I start with, how much information can I get? And the answer is a lot. So let's start by thinking about this. The length of the base is twice the length of the midsegment. So since these are parallel, that makes this the base. So if my midsegment is 5, this guy has to be 10. And let's pick a slightly brighter color. That's kind of hard to see that there's a difference there. So this is 10. Okay. So what else can I get? Okay, well that's the only thing that tells me anything about the midsegment and the base, other than I know this has to be a midpoint, so if this is 7, this part is also 7. Okay, because they have to be the same length on both sides. And if I know this whole thing's 20, if this is a midpoint, it has to divide it in half, so I can say this part is 10 and this part is 10. And then using the same logic, if I really wanted to find this entire thing, it would be twice that long because it's 7 and 7. I could call it 14. So with it, knowing these relationships helps us fill out a lot of little pieces of information. So that's why we want to deal with midsegments and kind of understand what's going on there. Okay, so try them out, see how they go.